Korea's first ever single malt whiskey was a 13-month-old spirit matured in New York, produced by the distillery Three Societies. So what is the story behind Korea's first single malt whiskey? What has been the response to this production? And what is shaping the current alcohol industry? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we speak with the man behind the efforts to pioneer the Korean whiskey industry. I have Bryan Do, the founder of Three Societies, here in the studio. Bryan, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Pleasure's mine.
Right, Bryan, let's start though with a few words on Korea's current alcohol trend. Is it true that people are in search of more diverse and perhaps premium drinking experiences?
It is actually very true. More people are looking for not just more diverse, but also healthier ways to drink their alcohol lately. It's changed a lot. It's changed recently in the past, I'd say 3-4 years. The pandemic has had a huge effect on that also.
I see. And tell us, that's what pundits have been saying as well, Bryan, that the pandemic itself has deeply affected our drinking patterns. Do you care to elaborate?
Yes, I'd say deeply in the sense of the industry separates it into two, on-trade and off-trade. On-trade being where it's at bars and restaurants and pubs, where off-trade is retail and then you take it at home or the beach and you consume it. So the on-trade sector in the bars and restaurants completely dried up during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And more people started to buy their alcoholic drinks at supermarkets or convenience stores, online if you could, and take it home to consume at home or friends' houses or outside. So that was the biggest change in the consumption of alcohol. So a lot more people also had more money to spend because they weren't spending it on other methods exactly of going outside and restaurants. And at restaurants, it's a little bit more expensive to buy alcohol there. So they had more money, so they would buy more premium products for them to consume at home and with friends.
Right, and talking about premium products, Bryan, how do you explain the growing popularity of whiskey among younger Koreans in recent years? I mean, even today we had a report about how whiskey sales last year jumped 15%, while sales of beer, I believe, have been falling for the past 4 years.
Yes. There are a few reasons behind that, but I think one of the main reasons why whiskey sales is still going up is people are still looking for a premium way to drink alcohol and still remain a little bit healthy, because I think what a lot of younger generation get out of whiskey, drinking whiskey these days, is they get the ability to drink a little less alcohol while still becoming a little bit more happy with their friends. So it helps them not only to stay a little bit healthier because they're drinking less, because usually whiskey has more alcoholic content per volume than beer or wine does, so they're consuming less.
Right. Bryan, you produced Korea's first single malt whiskey in the hills of Namyangju.
Yes.
Could you share with us a bit about the background behind this business venture?
Yes, well, we are the first single malt whiskey producer in Korea. And this started, I've had this in my mind for a while. When I exited my craft beer company, I was thinking, whenever I went around to different countries, I usually brought them a bottle of single malt that I really like, so we can share together. And as we said before, for me, drinking whiskey with friends is a much easier thing to do than drinking other from other alcoholic beverages. It's just sit down and have a small dram. That's what we call it, a small glass of whiskey with friends, and enjoy different banter. We can talk about culture, movies, sports while we're doing that. And because of that, I've always thought at the airport, geez, why isn't there a Korean whiskey that I can gift my friends? And I did a little research, and there seemed to be whiskey production back in the 80s, before the Olympics, before the '88 Olympics. But because of different regulations, tax hurdles, it died out fairly quickly within a year or two. And secondly, there wasn't the popularity that Korea has now amongst almost every different industry now, from cars to K-pop, to everything. So hopefully we can start a K-whiskey trend going forward in the future. So this will be, this was something where I thought of, geez, I'd like to give my friends Korean whiskey in the future and talk about this whiskey, but no one had it, so who better man to do it than me?
Right, and that was back in the year 2020 then?
Well, we started in 2020. June 2020 was our first distillation and maturation, but this project was going on since 2018.
Right, I see. Now, Bryan, I hear you follow the traditional production formula with a uniquely Korean flavor. Could you explain that for us?
Yes. I still believe the product will speak for itself. If it's a good product, it'll sell itself. But we have the burden of being Korea's first single malt whiskey maker. And not only do we need to produce a world-class whiskey, we need to produce a world-class whiskey that is unique to Korea. And some of the things, we have a Scottish master distiller that works with us, and we said, oh, how do we make a whiskey with a unique flavor profile that is something that can represent Korea also? So at our distillery, when we were going through the research and development phases, we have a small, I guess it would be a cafeteria, and we were eating a bunch of dishes. Of course, there were all the panchans, and then the main dish came out, which was spicy stir-fried pork. And we looked at each other, and that was our aha moment. Like, wow, okay, this is it. There's a plethora of different tastes, flavors, and aromas coming from all the side dishes, but the main is still spicy. And what do Koreans love in their food is spicy food. And Koreans have a different type of spicy than other spices around the world. I think ours is still a little bit traditionally spicy, but it also is sweet.
It is.
Like in the gochujangs and even the kimchis. It still has a little bit of the sweet kick to it. So with that in mind, we wanted to make a whiskey that was easy to drink, but still had a spicy finish at the end, so it can still be uniquely Korean.
Right. Bryan, what was the response to your first production of single malts, which were available here in the country and elsewhere, of course?
So the response was, for us, really overwhelming, surprised at how well it was taken. It matured very quickly, much faster than we knew it was going to mature quickly, but not as fast as it did. There are probably 2 or 3 of the most prestigious whiskey spirit competitions in the world. One is the IWSC, and the other one is the San Francisco Wine and Spirit Competition. Those 2 are probably the biggest. And we sent our whiskey in for feedback because there's world-class judges that give you really good feedback on how we should tweak our whiskey or make it better, or how to do different things. So we sent it in for some feedback, and we came back with an award, actually. So we won a bronze and we won a gold.
When was this? What year was that?
This was last year. So we were quite surprised by receiving an award on there. We were just looking for some feedback and got an award. So we knew it was good internally, but we didn't know that, I guess it's good to sell. So we sped up production, we sped up marketing and different aspects, and decided to sell it. We're selling it about a year earlier than we had expected.
I see. And I have a couple of impromptu questions now with regard to the response to your whiskey. Last January, probably before these competitions, a review about your whiskey was carried by Forbes magazine. The contributing writer, yes, I believe, Philip Schreberg, claimed to have been deeply impressed by your 13-month-old offering. He gave it an 8 out of a 10, which means extremely good. And for some perspective, it starts off, I believe, with a 0 to 4 rating, which means avoid the bottle, a 5, that means barely drinkable. And the 8 rating that you got is followed by a 9 and 10, which means superb. How did you respond? How did you feel when you read that?
We were definitely elated because we knew that this whiskey was fairly good. We didn't know it would be this good. And other respected people that are ranking and judging our whiskey, giving such a high ranking, we were a little bit taken aback. We were very happy and proud of that moment, but we still had more to do. I think we're trying to make different types of whiskeys in Korea that is unique to Korea again. So we're adding a lot of Korean ingredients to make it fun for Korean buyers. And because Korea is the flavor of the month everywhere in almost all industries, I think we get to play around with a lot more different flavors here. So we're looking at making Korean sherry, which is pretty much 복분자, casks, matured in 복분자 casks. We have different Korean types of peat that we're trying to use to make it a little more woody and the leathery smell that a lot of the whiskey fanatics like too.
Right, I see. And stay with your whiskey, Bryan. It's also been said that your 1-year single malts, they're equivalent to the 5-year Scottish single malts. Could you explain this for us?
Yes, that is thankful to the Korea nature and the environment and where we have our distillery. Our distillery is up on a hill in Namyangju, which is about 40 minutes north of Seoul. And our average temperature in the winter is -15. Our average temperature during the summer is about 35. And because of that, it helps turbocharge our whiskey production, our whiskey maturation, because whiskey is basically made inside wooden barrels. Wooden barrels are the same as your skin. When it's hot, it opens up the pores. And it sucks everything in for the wood. And then when it's cold, it kind of shrivels up and then it spits everything back out. So basically that's what it's doing in the winter and summers. The casks are acting almost like an accordion going back and forth. It's pulling in the spirit, it's pushing out the spirit, it's pulling in the spirit. So it's doing that a lot more than it would in Scotland, where Scotland is always very cold. So the cask and the wood is fairly tight most of the time. So we have the advantage in Korea, especially in our location, where the expansion and the contraction of the wood, which greatly affects the taste of the whiskey, is sped up maybe almost 5 times than it would in other places.
Right, I see. Broadly speaking, Bryan, what do you suppose are the prospects of Korea's whiskey industry in the global market?
I think right now the sky's the limit. We've been able to produce fairly good whiskey so far. It's been less than 3 years. We've submitted our whiskeys to different competitions this year also, so we'll see how these come out also. But I think by the early prognosis, we can make great whiskey in Korea. Just there are some hurdles that need to be addressed in Korea, and hopefully we can address those soon to get more people on board. It's lonely being the only, or being one of the only producers.
Being the only pioneer right now.
We have other conglomerates jumping on board. Lotte and Shinsegae both are already in the works of making fairly big distilleries down in Jeju Island. So that should help. But overall, the tax system and the regulations need to be overhauled in order for this industry to grow. One of the things is with single malt whiskey is made with barley. and we need more barley. To make more barley in Korea, I would like to propose, when I get to speak to government people, is because the rice consumption is going down right now in Korea, more people are not eating rice, they're eating more sandwiches and salads, to replace that rice with barley. Because barley is, when you speak to farmers, all the farmers will say barley is probably one of the easiest crops to grow. And it's so dead easy that you just put in the ground and it grows pretty much. And we can use that barley to make malt at the end of the day. Those are one of the regional aspects that can help the single malt whiskey industry in Korea. The others is if regulations and taxes are on par with different Korean-made traditional drinks, more players would jump in and make, when there's more competition, it always helps. It's never anything bad. Right now, we pretty much have a monopoly. We can do as we please, but for competition-wise, I think that's not as good for us and the industry in itself. So hopefully the Korean government will catch on to this. They caught on to this during the craft beer boom. They lowered the taxes for craft beer, and they saw that a lot of the different regions got their own. We started off with, I think we started about 6 or 7 craft breweries. Now there's over 100. This can help the different regional economies. It also helps the younger employment people to come on board and gives them a new industry to look at. So it helps in many different ways. I think the whiskey industry also can be even more beneficial than the craft beer industry in that aspect.
Right, I see. Bryan, you mentioned traditional Korean beverages, and that being said, what do you believe perhaps is the appeal of Korea's makgeolli?
Oh, makgeolli. Yeah, a lot more people are drinking makgeolli in Korea and abroad. I think it's, to be honest with you, it's easy to drink. It's easy to drink. It's not offensive at all, and the price is right. And the other thing is, I think people are doing really good branding with the new makgeolli that's coming out overseas, and a lot of the younger people that are making makgeolli now, their branding is, they're doing it really well to attract the new MZ generation and the younger generations. The branding has to be pretty much catered to them. So I think it's helping a lot in that aspect.
And aside from branding, Bryan, if you were supposed to pick another factor that would perhaps better promote Korea's makgeolli overseas, would you point to anything in particular?
Education. I think people need to be educated a little bit more on the way that this traditional drink was made and how it's made now. It's a fairly healthy drink. It's made from rice. So I think if people are more educated on this, it gives them more of a story to tell while they're drinking this traditional drink. These days, the story counts a lot behind whatever you're doing. Especially if you're giving your friend a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of makgeolli or a bottle of soju, if there's a story behind there, there's much more conversations to be had, and it's just much easier to get along.
It is. Bryan, talking about stories, now let's talk about your personal story. Before embarking on your business ventures, Bryan, you were here at Arirang.
Yes.
And then you went to Microsoft.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about your dramatic shift in profession? I remember us working together back in those days, the year
Yes.
2002, 2003, etc. Tell us a bit about your personal journey.
Yeah, I wish you didn't say I worked here in 2002, but that's, no, I'm kidding. That tells my age, but no. My personal journey, I think during my 20s, I wanted to just make myself happy and look for a new career and to see what careers were available. And I really, really enjoyed working here. It was, I was speaking to other people when that used to work here just last week and said, I used to skip to work because it seemed like a hobby when I worked here. And I really loved it. And I think that was because I was just happy at where I was. And in my 30s, I think I needed to be happy by making money. So I need to be more financially secure at the end of the day. So I had to join, put on a suit and join Microsoft, which was a great job in itself also. There's nothing wrong with that. And then in my 40s, I guess I wanted to make myself happy again. And I've always thought, okay, when I'm at my deathbed, am I going to be happy with what I've done during my, I don't know, 80 years in life? So I've looked back on that and said, what's going to make you happy? Let's do something that you have a passion for. And then I had passion for craft beer, so I hung up my suit and put on some overalls and some work clothes and started a craft beer company.
And this craft beer company that you had some very unique flavors, right? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it was in Korea. We were one of the first craft beer companies in Korea also. So with that pioneering spirit, I like to bring more Korean flavors into beer. So I've always thought, number one, what is unique to Korea that we can share with the world? So we made the first kimchi beer using some of the kimchi juices to make a sour beer. Then we made a 깻잎 or a perilla leaf beer to take the minty flavor from the leaf and put it into a beer. So just tried to push a lot of the unique flavors that Korea had to the world.
I see. And before you leave us, Bryan, very briefly speaking, do you have a few words that you would like to share perhaps with all the young people out there who are thinking of starting their new businesses?
I would say just go for it. I think as it is these days, you really only, I hate to use this cliche, but you only live once. So whenever I do these talks, it's if you have a passion for it, go for it. Don't go for it to make money. Don't go for it for societal pressures or anything. But if you have a passion for what your business is, I think they should go for it.
In another interview with another media, you spoke about not compromising too early on in the trade. Very briefly, what do you mean?
No, don't compromise on the product that you're making or the product that you're selling. Don't sell yourself short on anything, on the ingredients or the taste, or if it's on technology, on the experience.
I see. Bryan, talking to you today, I've decided if I leave this place, I'm going to go buy a plot of land, grow barley, sell it to you.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Right. Bryan, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Of course, thank you.
Right, well, on that note, we say goodbye. Be sure to join us same time tomorrow, that is Friday, as we mark Ukraine's first full year of defense against Russian aggression. Thank you for now.